Once he moved his family in, A.G. Rhodes would watch from his front porch rocker on Peachtree Street as the world rapidly changed around him. The automobile would become the dominant mode of transportation. The U.S. would join World War I in Europe. Women would win the right to vote. Alcohol would be prohibited, and Charles Lindbergh would fly nonstop across the Atlantic Ocean. In his 77th year, after a period of illness, A.G. Rhodes fell into a coma and died in his Lrev Castle, June 16, 1928. He was buried in Westview Cemetery next to his wife Amanda, who had passed away the previous summer. In addition to charitable bequests to the Atlanta Home for the Incurables and the Peachtree Christian Church, the bulk of his estate, including his dream house, went to his two children, Joseph D. Rhodes and Luana Rhodes Bricker. The younger Mr. Rhodes and his sister, who were already comfortably situated in large homes of their own in Atlanta and Miami, made the decision to donate the building to the state of Georgia to use as a new home for its Department of Archives and History. In this photograph, Luana is shown with J.D. and Governor Hardeman in the center. The gift stipulated that the building be used for the housing of rare volumes, manuscripts, books, papers, documents, trophies, picture souvenirs, relics, statuary, and works of art. The building was renamed Rhodes Memorial Hall.
At the time that the children deeded the home to the state of Georgia, they were in need of a place to house their historic archives. So they actually moved the Georgia Department of Historic Archives into the home, and they were housed here from 1930 until 1965. During that time, there was a wonderful little woman that was researching a really thick book that spent a lot of time here in the home by the name of Margaret Mitchell. She actually researched Gone with the Wind right here in Rhodes Hall.
If Luana was generous in donating her father's dream house to the state, her son, Rhodes Perdue, saw opportunities for profit by developing the grounds around the building. In 1937, despite the Depression, he announced the construction of Rhodes Center. This was to be Atlanta's first planned shopping center and would surround Lrev with a diner, liquor store, beauty salon, five and dime store, movie theater, and an A&P. Initially, the use of an old house to store old treasures seemed a natural fit. However, W.F. Denny did not design the structure as an archive. Furthermore, the state did not always provide funds to keep up the building. Maintenance problems were inadequately addressed or ignored. The rare volumes and manuscripts mentioned in the children's grant were often exposed to leaky ceilings, ultraviolet light, a damp basement, or simple neglect. In the early 1960s, the state legislature approved $6.6 million for a new archives building in downtown Atlanta. This monolithic marble building was completed in June 1964 and would serve as a state-of-the-art climate-controlled vault for the state's history. While moving thousands of books out of Rhodes Hall would literally lighten its load, the new archives building would also rob the old home of its most prized possessions. In what can only be described as an act of architectural pillaging, the Department of Archives and History ordered the removal of the unique painted glass windows and carved mahogany staircase, and set them up as a display inside the new, ultra-modern marble vault downtown. The ostensible reason for the removal was preservation. In fact, that was not the outcome. The ripping out of the staircase resulted in the loss of one of the reception hall's unique murals. Worse still, with the records and Rhodes's crown jewels now under new roof, the state took even less interest in the old building. Repairs, if they happened at all, were stopgap. Over time, the original silk wall coverings and draperies in the parlor, a stained glass window in the dining room, and many light fixtures on the second floor disintegrated or disappeared. Before the house slipped further into decline, the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation stepped into the picture.
Well, Rhodes Hall was a vacant building from 1965 until 1983. It was owned by the state of Georgia, given to the state of Georgia in 1929 by the Rhodes family, the family of the man who founded Rhodes Furniture Company. So this building was sitting here vacant with an obligation on behalf of the state to maintain it and to keep it as a historic site. So the Georgia Trust by 1983 was strong enough financially that we approached the state of Georgia and asked if we could lease the building from the state of Georgia and operate an educational facility here. And so in 1983 we signed a lease with the state of Georgia for $10 a year, but the obligation to maintain the building, to restore it, would rest with the Georgia Trust. So since '83 we've performed a lot of restoration work on the building, opened it as a educational facility, given tours of the building throughout that time. So we've had a really great relationship with Rhodes Hall, and I think this is a good example of a partnership between a private organization, because we are a private organization, and the state of Georgia. Since the Georgia Trust moved in the building in 1983, we've made a number of improvements and performed a lot of restoration to the building. The most notable thing, I think, is the restoration of the windows and the staircase. When the state of Georgia moved out in 1965, they took with them those beautiful stained glass windows and the mahogany staircase, and they installed them as an exhibit in the Archives and History building downtown. But in about 1990, the state closed that building, and that staircase became surplus property, and we approached the state about getting it back, and we had to raise private money to bring it back, and I think it cost $125,000, which really sounds cheap compared to today's restoration prices. So it was put back in, beautifully done by great craftsmen. But we've worked on the roof for many times since that period. We've repainted all of the graphic scenes downstairs. We've restored original paint colors. We've worked on woodwork. We've done floor restoration. We're constantly patching plaster problems that we get from little drips in the roof. And so really there's been a lot of work done, including just 2 years ago the installation of an elevator to make the building handicap accessible.
Not only does the Georgia Trust maintain the building, but Rhodes Hall serves as its headquarters, demonstrating that buildings from a century ago can provide a comfortable and efficient space for modern office work. In 1910, an Atlanta newspaper artist published his vision of what Peachtree Street would look like 100 years hence. It is significant that the artist made no allowance for smaller buildings, open spaces, or trees. Was this a vision that Atlantans of the period wished for or feared? Rhodes Hall stands today almost in defiance of modernity, of the supposed inevitability of new forms replacing older ones. It perhaps also serves to refute Romanticism's theory that the creations of man are transient and doomed to decay. It is a manifestation of optimism and a confirmation of the truth that a great idea will long outlive its creator.
So you may hear the church bells chime in the background, and there's a wonderful connection between Rhodes Hall and what is Peachtree Christian Church, which are the bells that you hear at the top of every hour. Peachtree Christian Church actually sits right behind Rhodes Hall, and Mr. Rhodes himself had donated the land that Peachtree Christian now sits on. Believe it or not, his daughter, Luanna, as I mentioned, she was married twice. Unfortunately, her second marriage ended in divorce, and husband number 3 was actually a pastor at First Christian Church, which is just down the street on Peachtree Street here. Well, when his congregation found out that he was going to be marrying a woman that had been previously divorced, that was quite scandalous during that time period, so they actually kicked him out of the church as their pastor. Well, Mr. Rhodes, being one of the wealthiest men here in the state of Georgia, obviously couldn't have an unemployed son-in-law. So what does he do? But he donates the land as well as $150,000 to construct the sanctuary of what is now Peachtree Christian Church. And those are the bells that you hear at the top of every hour. You can imagine who the very first pastor was, none other than his future son-in-law.